came down to the city, and I stayed a little while with Walt and Rose. They lived up there in Mount Airy. I stayed for a few days with them until I got a job and got established, and then I went with a guy by the name of Ward, and we went up to the Sunrise River where it joins the St. Croix, and there used to be a ferry boat that went across the river there, and the ferry boat itself was sitting on the beach there. And Don Ward had bought that ferry boat and was going to move it down to some acreage he bought to use it as a house. But in the meantime, we camped in that thing. So it was in the spring of 1950. I was camping up there in that houseboat until I wanted to leave the kids down there until the school year was out before I moved them. So I went down then after I'd stayed in that for a while, and I rented a couple of cabins out of Coon Lake. And when school was out, I went down there and moved Mama and the kids and all the furniture and everything down there to those two cabins. And we had used one cabin as a kitchen and cooking and eating, and the other one for sleeping. And it was a real fun summer. The kids had, well, Mother was walking to a little store down there one day, and it was about, I suppose, about 2 or 3 city blocks. It was probably about a half mile down to that little store. And on the way home, there was a little chipmunk sitting in the road. And Mother always had a way with animals anyhow. And I suppose somebody maybe had made a pet out of that, because the chipmunk did come up and sat in her hand. She put him in her apron pocket and brought him home. And so that was Chippy. He was quite a pet. We had him around there pretty much in the summer until when we wanted to wash clothes or anything, I'd have to carry the water with buckets down there, because we didn't have running water in those cabins. We had to carry all the water from a well up on a little further up from the beach. So I carried some buckets of water down there for Mother to wash clothes the next morning. And we get up in the morning, and poor little old Chippy, evidently he'd try to get one of them buckets for a drink, and he fell in and he drowned. So we lost our little pet. In the meantime, that was just with Rose that I was staying with in the city. In the meantime, because Walt had died of a heart attack in 1949, so just Rose and the kids at home. Mary Bell had got married already, and Wally was going with Mary Ann at that time, but he still wasn't married, so he was at home with Rose. Rented a cement block house up there on the north side of Coon Lake, just in the same beach area with the cabins that we lived in. I took Bill and Art and went out into the woods, which that was a very heavily wooded area, and I showed them the moss, or how to tell direction by moss on the trees, the hardwood trees from the softwoods, how to determine what was swamp area ahead of you by looking at the trees. And they got pretty good at that. And I took Bill and Art out there one day and got it pretty deep out into the woods, and then told them, now I'm lost. So Bill, you lead us out. So he learned his lessons very well. He led us right out of the woods, right out into the direction that we wanted to go. So then I wasn't quite so nervous about the kids out there playing in the woods. That winter we had an awfully lot of snow. And well, in November, on November 11th, we we got a telephone call that my dad had died. So we went out there, very sad affair, and buried my father. And then we had snow that was just unbelievable. I was driving my car. I was working at the arsenal. I drove to work every day, so I had a pair of chains for the car. I managed to get through the road. And one Friday evening, I made a habit of stopping at some of the supermarkets on the way. Mother would send a grocery list with me on Friday, and I'd stock up for the week's groceries. So this particular Friday, that was very wet and heavy snow, and the wind blowing pretty good, and I came back with my groceries. Of course, I was late already because I stopped to do that shopping, and where I turned off of Highway 65 to go east toward Coon Lake Beach. This also was a cutoff road between 65 and the village of Wyoming. And here I run onto a whole series of cars that were all stuck in that snow, and the guy was out in it very long. You'd get really wet. So I had a chain along, and I managed to get by him because I had the chains on my car, and I made a track in front of him and then backed up to the front one and hooked the chain on him and pulled him through, and then helped him get the rest of them through. By this time, I'm getting kind of wet and chilly, but so were all these people. This was a whole funeral procession. They had been to a funeral over at Isanti, and they were coming back. And after about the second or third time that they got stuck in that snow, I would back up to him, and the guy would just sit in his car, and he wouldn't even get out to hook the chain on. So I'm getting kind of wet and pretty cold, so I can see that I better not be carrying out here too long, or I will be in serious trouble. So I'd started down the road to home, and I got the chills. I was getting cold, so I stopped in a farmhouse. The people's name was Jackson, and went in there, and I got some dry clothes and got warmed up, and then decided I'd better start for home, as I had all these groceries in the car, and yet no snowplow had gone by. So I finally left that place and went out to start down the road, and about that time a snowplow did go by, and it had this row of funeral cars all following that snowplow. So I got in behind them and went over to the little road that turned off. Well, now there ain't no snowplow down that. That's about a half a mile from that little store where Mother used to walk down to. And I had gone down that road a ways, and I finally came to a snowdrift that was way up there, higher than my car. So I would let the car roll into the snowdrift, and then I would back up and take another run at it, and each time I'd push through a little bit, and I thought, well, that snowdrift can't be too thick now. I maybe can explode through this. So I backed my car up, in the tracks that I've made, took a run at that snowdrift, and I suppose I was getting up to 25 or 30 miles an hour by the time I hit it. Well, it was a mistake. I didn't go through, but my car was buried in there. But I had taken my shovel and put it inside the car rather than in the trunk, so it was kind of nice and warm in there under that snowdrift, but I realized that I can't stay in there very long. I'd run out of air, so I rolled my window down and take my shovel and start pushing snow, and I finally opened up a tunnel so I could get out from where I was. So I shoveled around the window then and got got it cleared away so I could get at the car door, and then I sorted out the groceries. I took everything that I thought would freeze and put in one bottle or one box, and I took that box of groceries and set it on my shoulder and started for home in all that deep snow. By this time I was getting awfully tired. I had been fighting that snow for a long time, and pretty soon I realized that I'd have to sit down or stop, or I just wouldn't get up again. So I struggled along with that box of groceries on my back, and each time I would think I couldn't go any further, I'd tell myself, well, just one more step. So I finally got down to the house, and there was about 5 steps to go up on the porch to get up to the porch level and to get into the house. All of them were very, very hard steps to make. I did manage to stay upright, that box of groceries on my back, and got up by the door, and I just run out of gas when I was at the door. I just collapsed against the door, and if somebody inside heard the noise against the door, and they'd opened it, and I just fell into the house and spilled some groceries. And our mom and the kids were very much alarmed. But we got some dry clothes on me and some hot soup in me, and I survived that all right. Now, during that winter, Art and Bill and another neighbor boy, they run like deer. They run out over that lake and through the woods. And one day when I wasn't home, they had gone for a stroll out there, and that was pretty deep snow. But they go like greyhounds, and this little short-legged dog had tried to go with them, and they must have went for quite a distance. But anyhow, they wound up carrying the little dog home, and from then on he was paralyzed in his hind legs. He just couldn't seem to manipulate his hind legs, and he'd lay on the floor and cry, and he couldn't get outside, and he'd mess on the floor. And I'd grown quite fond of that dog because I did owe him my foot. Without him, I would have lost it. But I finally realized that there was nothing more I could do, so I got Herbie, the son of the man that owned the store down at the corner. I hired him. I said, take my little dog out and put him away. I couldn't do it myself. So I cried a little bit, but that was the end of Schmaltzy. Now towards spring, I wanted to get out onto a farm with this family. So the land was so sandy around there, I wasn't too interested in buying any land. So I finally rented a farm over near Stacy. It was the Doc Williams place. And I bought a little Allis Chalmers C tractor and some equipment. And we got a few cows. And that was probably about 18 or 20 miles from Coon Lake Beach over to that farm. But we borrowed a trailer from a big four-wheel trailer that belonged to the guy that owned the store down there. And I would load that up, and then Ma and the kids would drive that tractor down the road over to that farm in the day, and then we'd get it unloaded and bring it back again. But it was kind of a fun deal moving there in the spring of '51. And we got out there to that place in time to put in a crop. Bobby he got to be pretty good at handling that tractor. And I was out there seeding in the spring, and Pete wasn't quite big enough yet, but he wanted to be. And he really made a fuss and whatnot that he wanted to go out there and seed grain, and I was out there seeding, of course, seeding in the evening, and after I get home from work, and Pete was out there with me, and he said, "I can do it, Dad." So I finally said, "Well, okay, you seed it, and I'll ride on the tractor with you." So I rode with him till we got to the other end in that sandy land, and he was trying to turn that tractor around, and it's a tricycle tractor, and it didn't come around very good. And before Pete could do anything about it, the front end was through the fence and heading down into the ditch. And I reached over and pulled the tractor out of gear. Pete felt very bad about that he couldn't manage that tractor to help me with the seeding. But I got a couple of cows, and I bought a combine from Brother Squint, and he brought that down on his truck from Browns Valley, and he threw a runt pig up in that hopper. And the pig's head was oversized. His milk teeth had never been removed, and he just couldn't close his mouth to eat anymore. So one day I was out there in the barnyard hurrying out to go do my milking, and I see this. In the meantime, I bought another white pig, and we called her Alice. And this black one, he was a runt. He was a homer. He was a barrel. But I see him rolling the ear of corn around there one morning, and he couldn't eat it. So I grabbed him by the hind legs and set him up on his hind end and opened his mouth, and milk teeth had grown so long and curled up that hog couldn't close his mouth anymore. So I broke those teeth off from him and then turned him loose, and he soon found out he could eat real good. So Artie, he took them pigs on as pets, I had a few cows by that time, and there was a feedway between two rows of cows. So Alice would lay down there in the hay in that feedway, and Art would lay down with his head on Alice's belly and his feet up on Homer, and old Alice would sing to him like an old sow with a litter of pigs. She'd just grunt, grunt, grunt. We always got a big kick out of that. And I'd gone down then to the St. Paul dog pound down on Plato Street. Mother and I had gone down there. We wanted to get a dog. And, we got in there, and there was a black dog. I think he was some kind of an English Shepherd or something. Anyhow, that dog selected me. We really hadn't decided which one we wanted, but he put his feet up on his pen and made such a fuss when we came there that I looked at Mom, she looked at me, and that's the one we wanted. So we brought the dog home, and we named him Pluto. That's the nearest we could get to Plato Street. Now the State Game and Fish Department had seeded that area with young pheasants, little hatchlings, and this old Pluto, he was a bird dog, and he'd help Mother round up her baby chicks, and he was very gentle with them. He'd get a baby chick in his mouth and carry it without hurting the chick at all. Well, he got out there along the road where they turned these baby pheasants loose, and I don't know if he thought they were some of Ma's chicks, but he just worked himself to a frazzle trying to get all of them little baby pheasants rounded up and in a bunch up there in the yard. We got a big kick out of watching him, but he didn't hurt any of them, but they all, he'd get some of them rounded up, go out to get some more, and the ones he had would scatter, and he just worked himself into a frazzle. When I was planting corn, I'd gone out one evening, because I had to do everything after I get through work, and in the meantime, I bought an old Chevrolet truck with a flat deck on it. So I'd use that for a wagon, all my seed and stuff, and I'd gone out to the field, and I had the tractor out there and the corn planter and this truck, and I had planted corn until after dark when I'd finished, and Pete was out there with me, and I'd often let the boys drive the truck. I'd put it in super low and just let it idle along, and then let them steer it. So I was getting kind of low on gas with the tractor, so I told Pete, now you get in the truck and you drive that home, but you keep an eye on the tractor now, because I'm just about out of gas. Well, I started him down the road, and then I'm following with the tractor, but he took me literally. He wasn't looking forward at all. He was just looking back, watching that tractor. And the only place he could have found a ditch was a little bit of a draw through there, the culvert under the road. That's where he picked to go off the road. Or we managed to get the truck out and all that, but he said, Dad, you said to keep an eye on you. Well, he sure did. He wasn't watching the road at all. He just watched me. And we bought 50 geese for Gail for a 4-H project. Them geese was quite a point of interest around the place. They couldn't leave anything as it was, and then during that summer I had taken the gas tanks, which were on the south side of the house, and I had driven a well point down through the sand in the basement so we'd have water in the house. I had a pump down there, and I changed and made a different room into the kitchen, and so I moved the gas tanks around to that side of the house, and it was quite a while before you could get a night's sleep, because all night them geese would be out there pecking away at those pipes, which had been moved, and they weren't where they should be. And then the same thing that fall, Mom had gone out and put rosin paper around the house and nailed it on with glass, but that didn't stay there too long. And them geese worked on that until they had just every last little bitty piece of paper tore off of that house, where it would stick out under the last. They trimmed that up very neatly. They got it all cleaned up. Bob was he was out. I'd been planting potatoes, and Bob was out there with the tractor then. And when I went to work, I was using a potato planter, and Bob had seen how we planted potatoes, so he was out there finishing up with the last few rows of potatoes when I had to go to work. And of course the truck was out there with the seed on it, and little Artie was out there. Well, Art wasn't going to school yet. He couldn't sit in the seat and see up over the steering wheel. So, well, Bob wanted to bring the tractor home and the truck too. So he set Art in there and started the truck and put it down in low gear and let it idle. And then he started Art toward the house with the truck, and he was standing up in the seat and was steering it. And Bob took the tractor and run it home, and Ma seen this parade coming down the road, and it scared her very much, and she run to catch up with that truck, and of course Art was looking at her, wondering what she's so excited about. And when his curiosity got the best of him and he wanted to know what was her problem, he just reached over and turned the switch off. That's the way he stopped it. Of course, Ma got pretty much shook up about that. While we were living on this farm, that Cheech graduated from high school. She'd met Dave. Another incident that happened to her before she got married. And before she graduated, there one Sunday, a couple of boys that came in the yard, and this happens when you got a couple of good-looking high school daughters. And these boys that came in the yard, and it was on a Sunday, so I was home. And the girls were out there talking to the guys. Finally, the girls came back in the house and said, "Dad, these guys want us to go for a ride with them." And I said, "Well, no, the guy that owned that car, he had already demolished 3 or 4 cars. And so I told the girls, no, I don't want you riding with him. He's not a safe driver." So they said, "Well, okay, why don't you go out and tell him that?" So I said, "All right, I will." So I went out there and I told him, you guys are nice boys and all that, and you're welcome here anytime you want it, but I don't want my girls riding with you because I haven't seen any indication yet that you've learned how to drive. So they didn't make much of a fuss about it, but the guys left, and I guess they were on their way to Anoka. And just before we got to Anoka on the road that cuts across from Wyoming, the road crosses a railroad track. Well, these boys went over there. Of course, it was dark when they got over that railroad track, and they drove right smack into the side of a freight train that was passing on that crossing. One of the boys was killed, and the other was hospitalized. Of course, the car was totally demolished. It was almost a new car. And again, I thank the Lord for guiding me and telling me what I should do and what I shouldn't do. And that fall, she graduated from high school, and she had met Dave, and she went down to the Arsenal, and she got a job down there too, right? So then her and I would ride on the Arsenal bus. So it was kind of pleasant going back and forth to work, but each riding with me on the bus. And then in must have been 1953, we moved to a different farm over there. I still wasn't ready to buy. I didn't want to buy in that sand. And we moved over to the Mike Renardi farm. And then in 1954, Cheech and Dave were married, and there was a little cabin there on that place, on that Mike Renardi farm beside the house. So we fixed that cabin up, and that's where they lived in the first while that they were married. And while I was on this Mike Renardi farm, we were out cutting wood. It was always an enjoyable time. I love to take the boys and go out in the woods and cut wood. So there was a cluster of trees that was growing on a kind of a side hill, and the eye deceives you. They don't always lean the way it looks like they would. So I had made a slash in one of these trees, and then was cutting it off, so expecting it to fall down the hill. Well, it had fell the other way and was pinching my saw in there, so I took the axe and trimmed out a long pole and put it in between these trees for a pry, and then I told Bob and Pete, "Now you guys pull on the end of this and pry that tree down, and as soon as you get it off the saw, I'll finish cutting it off and it'll fall." So I guess I wasn't thinking too clearly there, so I got on my knees and I'm underneath of this pole that they're prying on, and I got the tree leaned out and falling, and then I cut it off, but I didn't stop to think, when that tree falls, there ain't nothing to hold that pole up, so the pole dropped down and hit me on the top of the head, and of course I felt a sting and a pop in my neck, and it hurt a little bit. I rolled around the ground for a while, and then got up and went back to cutting wood, and it wasn't until some time later I found out that I had broke my neck. When that tree fell down on it, I had developed a kind of a pain high up in my chest on one side, and persistent pain that wouldn't go away, and I finally went to a doctor, and he took some x-rays and looking around to see what was the matter, and he discovered in the x-rays that broken neck, and that was pinching a nerve in there and was making that sore spot in my chest. But eventually that went away. No big problem. We had a steer that was feeding out there for our house meat, and there were a lot of woods on this farm, good hill for sliding, and that steer didn't come up out of the woods one evening in the fall. So that weekend I had some time then when I didn't have time to go look for him when I had to work every day. So that weekend I take a gun and I walked down through the woods. Looking around, I finally found that steer down there. Some hunters had shot him and then left him lay there. I was very bitter about that. That's a terrible waste. We had an electric fence around there, and one night we were sitting there in the yard, and we could hear one of them evenings when sound carries real good, and we were just sitting out in the yard. It was very pleasant there, and we could hear coon hounds, and we could hear guys hollering, and we saw a shaft of light make 2 or 3 loops up in the air, and the sight would get there, of course, before the sound would. And shortly after those loops of light, we heard a guy let out a whoop, and the other one hollered out there, "What the hell happened?" And then he come back and he said, "That damn electric fence." So the guy and his coon dogs, they was screaming and hollering, and they had run into that electric fence I had down there. It was while we are on this place that Gail met Nick, and the first Sunday that Nick was out to our place, I had a bunch of pigs, and I had just a low wire electric fence to keep those pigs in, and so we were out behind the barn and was playing ball not too far from that pig farm, and somebody had batted the ball and it dropped in there near those pigs, and one of those Hampshire pigs, I suppose he was about a 60-pound pig, he grabbed that ball and started to run. Well, of course, everybody's after that pig to keep the ball away from him, and that pig he got in the game. He didn't want to get out. He hung onto that ball. He would run with that ball, dodge in and out among the trees, and nobody was catching him, and then when the guys would get tired of running and they'd stop, the pig would lay that ball down, but he'd keep an eye on him, and he'd stand right there by it. And somebody would make a sudden run in there to try to get the ball, and that pig would grab that ball, and he was gone again. And I think is one of the funniest things I've ever saw in my life. I was just sitting down on the rocks alongside the barn, and back up there, laughing so hard I couldn't hardly sit up. But I don't know what kind of an impression we made on Nick, but that was the first time that I had met him, and the first time he was out to the farm. I expect Nick will probably remember that day. I had an old truck, and in the wintertime I'd take the dudes off in that truck and put a pair of chains on them. You could go pretty much anywhere, and Cheech and Dave had a old Pontiac car, and this road going west from our place out to Highway 61 was pretty much snowed in, and one day Cheech and Dave were trying to come back through that road, and they got stuck out there, and some of the kids noticed that they were down there. It was bitterly cold, so they came back and said, "Dad, Cheech and Dave are stuck down there." So I threw a chain on the old truck and started her up and went down through that snow, and I get down to where the car is. Of course, I've got to turn around, but there's a driveway out into a field there, so I just turned out into the field and made a big circle turn out in the field there, and this just cracked up Cheech and Dave. And he said, "Hey, that's Superman. I could go anywhere." They were stuck in the road, and that old truck just put her in low gear, and she'd plow a lot of snow and just made a big loop out there and turned around, came back on the road, and backed up in front of them and hit onto them, and pulled them out and took them home. It was one fall when I was living on that place. I hadn't had much time to do any hunting. Dad, before he died, had given me his old double-barrel shotgun. Art has that gun now. It's an old Belgian double-barrel. And I used to be a real good shot with that gun when I was a boy, but I hadn't shot it for years and just hadn't had much time to do much hunting, raising a family, and working and all that. But I thought one day I'm going to take old Pluto out during pheasant season. So I had some corn shocks out there east of the place, so I took old Pluto and the shotgun, and none of the boys went. I told the boys all stay home. I just want to work this dog alone. So we went out there, and Pluto was a real good hunter. He would stay in and search back and forth. And finally, he flushed me a pheasant, and of course I know that's my bird. I pulled the shotgun up and fired, and the bird kept right on going. And Pluto, he turn around and look at me and bark a little bit. Now this happened 3 times, and I missed them birds. 3 times I didn't hit them. The last time this happened, Pluto turned around and barked at me and went home. He left me. Guess he gave me the message pretty clean there that if you can't hit them, there ain't no need of me flushing them. So that disturbed me for quite a while. Why I'd missed those shots, because I hadn't been a real good shot, and then I got to checking the gun out. Then when I'd throw that gun up, there's no way I could get my eye down on the level of that barrel. I always had the barrel high. That stock was too short. I had did some growing since the last time I shot that gun, so I added 3 inches onto the end of the stock, and then when I throw it up, the gun was on the level. So then we took Pluto out, and then he was happy. When he'd flush a bird, the bird would come down. So we were pretty good hunting pair. During the duck season, a friend of mine, a neighbor, old Barney Good, whom I'd become pretty well acquainted with, and Bob was a real good buddy of Oland, one of Barney's sons. So Bob and Olin Good and Jack Guy were going to go out duck hunting. Well, there were ponds. There was a good pond right down in the woods in my place where the beaver had built a dam down there, and there was good duck hunting there. No, they had a place figured out where they were going to go to hunt ducks. Also, there was a pond over on Barney's farm where Barney had worked in the feed mill, and they had taken some seed corn that was 2 years old, and they were not allowed to sell it anymore. So he'd taken that seed corn out and dumped it in that slough. There was a lot of ducks out there. They was swimming around and bobbing down. When the boys went out, Barney and asked me, he said, "You want to go duck hunting?" And I said, I enjoy going out. I wasn't too keen about hunting them, but I took my old shotgun and went over to Barney's, and we crawled through the corn and the grass and got up to this pond. It was quite a pleasant scene watching them ducks out there. They were all bobbing there, turn their hind ends up and dive down to the bottom to pick up some corn, and there were hundreds of ducks on that pond, just about any breed you'd like. And we were laying there watching the ducks, and Barney leaned over and looked at me and said, "Art, do you like duck?" And I said, "No, not particularly. I don't really care for them." He said, "Well, I don't either." He said, I think it's more fun watching them than shooting them. So we spent our afternoon laying out there just watching them ducks. Very pleasant day. He was visiting, and when we got home that evening, the boys they hadn't had any luck hunting ducks at all. We didn't tell them about that pond out there with corn in it, so I don't know whether they ever did find out about it, but we didn't tell them right away. Uh, and then in deer hunting season, Bob and Jack Guy wanted to go out deer hunting. Well, I didn't want to let the boys go out deer hunting alone, so one Saturday, then I had a Saturday off, and we started down the road from the house going south, and there's a series of little hills, not big ones, just little raises, and this sand road. And off to the west side of that road was quite a wild area down in there. Now that's all part of the Sunrise River project, but at that time that was lowland and swampy area off on the right there, and there was quite a few deer in there. So we were walking down the road, and was going to turn into a place where we could walk down into that wooded area. And when we come up over one of them raises, I saw three more guys coming over another raise, and they were coming our way. So we were walking toward each other, and I hadn't given that too much thought until they were on top of one of the little rays, we were on top of another one, and the one in between us, a deer popped out of the woods and just run out and stood there in the road. Well, there's only one thing I could think of. There wasn't time to tell the boys to duck and don't shoot. So I just dropped my rifle and made a flying tackle and tackled the two boys and rolled them into the ditch, expecting gunfire any second. And I didn't hear anything. Well, when I got up and looked, and the deer was gone, and then I see the other guy over there, the other three guys doing the same thing. They were getting up out of the ditch. So it was Tom Heisler and